areas of New Thought that I really like is the amount of teachers that we've had since New Thought began in the 1800s. And teachers who became authors and wrote books about their understanding of New Thought. And for me to read this from the past is really great. And then also to have teachers who taught students who also came out and became authors and teachers themselves, as explained by threes that we have, Science of Mind, Unity, and Divine Science. The creators of all three of those were students of Emma Curtis Hopkins, who is called the teacher of teachers. So it's great. There's a website you can go to read all these books and authors that of New Thought that go back quite a way. And you get to understand each individual's viewpoint of New Thought, which is why that's the title of it, because it's always a new thought. We're not stuck in some old way of thinking, or we've got something new. Each of you can have a new thought regarding New Thought at each time. So, since we started talking about man and its purpose, I want to refer to the older authors of New Thought, some ideas from them, and a lot that came from Science of Mind regarding our consciousness, raising our consciousness, which comes from our thoughts. So as I've stated before, our consciousness is every thought that we've had since we were born about any experience and any situation we've had in life becomes our consciousness and how we see things. Therefore, to raise the quality of our lives and our thoughts, we want to raise our consciousness. I've spoken here on New Thought about how, again, a new thought, a new life. Our thoughts create our reality. And so we want to be aware of what kind of thoughts have we got? Where's our consciousness at? What needs to change to raise our consciousness so we can see things at a higher level? Last week, I spoke about mind being the greatest discovery, part 1. And there was two thoughts in two ways of thinking, as I said. One is, you can think from the spiritual Christ, Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Muhammad, mighty I am presence, fully realized planetary Christ, God, Goddess. How about that? That's kind of describes it all to me, because it's all about God and how God has been in all these teachers and our I am presence and with everyone. Or you could think on the other side, which is your negative ego, fear-based, separative, dualistic, illusionary, lower self, mind, thinking, feeling. Doesn't that just kind of like the energy of it take you down a bit? So, since this describes our dualistic way of thinking, which we as humans have in this world, we want to discuss it more. So the first great discovery, I want to remind you something I talked about last week. The first great discovery that man made was that he could think. That was the day he said, I am, which is like God and source. God is I am. Everything that follows after that, I am power, I am love, I am life. And man discovered it. And that marked his first day of personal attainment. From that day on, he became an individual and he had to make further progress himself. From that day on, there was no compulsory evolution, but he had to work in conscious union with life. That's the basis from which man is growing and evolving, and it's infinite because our souls go on. There is no end. So behind him, as the mind, is the great unknown, but not the great unknowable. It's inside of us. As a result of this discovery that he could think, plan, and execute, man then made up great civilizations. He began to perceive that nature worked through him in order to work for him. So let's talk about mind, the great discovery, part 2. This begs the question, what I said about how nature works through our mind. Where do we get our mental impressions and our thoughts from? The paramount problem of philosophy now as in the past is how and whence do we get our mental impressions? Kant, a theologist, said, we are able to perceive an object because it awakens an intuitive perception within us. How could it awaken an intuitive perception within us unless the medium which created the subject has already existed within us? Medium being the substance in which form is transmitted, or in other words, God is the medium through which all things come. The intuitive perception was not the result of perceiving the object, but instead of the cause of the object itself. So that's what he would have us understand when he says there's only one mind common to all men. It's a great belief and statement, right? To know that we only have one mind, we're not separate. That which is apparently outside of us can be known to the individual through our intuition, which is our connection to God. That's God speaking to us. We can see the perception, and the perceiver must be one in the same mind. What we perceive, who we are as we perceive. No object can appear to exist in this objective world unless there is first a subjective world to perceive it. So objective means to have an object with a real substantial existence, whereas subjective means seen from the point of view of the thinking subject. So what we see and what is out there, how can we make that as one? There's no object outside of reality. And again, people look at the reality like, this is the reality of my life. That's reality. No. Reality is our oneness with God, how we think, how we feel, what we see in this world. That's our reality. And it must be an infinite perceiver or an infinite mind. It's the one mind common to all men. Again, I'll keep saying that over and over again. So remember that when you're sitting here by yourself, you're part of one mind, the one mind of God in man. So the Bible says, in him we live and move and have our being. Him or it or God. Those are terms that we use. Jesus said, reality is not in the mountains so far off, but it is here within us. We heard that so often, the kingdom of heaven is within. So without trying to define or make any attempt to explain, we just want to connect to the simple statement that says mind is both universal and individual. As I've said before, here's God that comes down into 7 billion people across the world, and it's the one mind of God that's in these 7 beings, but it is expressed individually. Each of us have different ways of seeing things around us. So it's not only universal and abstract, but concrete and individual. The mind that is personified, the mind that we think about, is the same mind, which is universal, the same mind all around the planet. This is the perception that Buddha, Jesus, and other great spiritual leaders had. They understood that the universe has to be one in order for it to be at all. Think about that. It cannot be unless it's one, because then it'd be broken off into little things and it wouldn't be the same that it is. Jesus saw that when he said in substance, who has seen me has seen the Father. That's the perception of oneness. Most people think that they're talking about, Jesus is talking about himself, but that's not true. Images of thought, although they appear to arise from without, actually, and we look at things and we think it's from outside, but it actually comes about from inside of us, from the objective side of us. In order that nature may be coherent and come into self-expression, there must be this world that's manifest for everything to manifest, for all the thoughts and the ideas that come about. They're physically outside of us, but they exist in the same medium in which we have our being, which is the oneness of God. God is living within us, with each and every one. And so you could look at it as here's this one mind, here's this one medium that we're all a part of. And the intelligence by which we perceive it. So we have a way of perceiving things. And it's the same intelligence that created it. You get that? The same intelligence that's going on is the same intelligence that created. God created. It's right here. Therefore, while it is objectively separate, it is subjectively unified. So it looks separate, but it's unified, the oneness. Our image of thought rises from within a medium in which both one sees what is going on and is that which is seen. And we exist in a state of unity, of oneness with everybody. God exists in everything. God exists in everyone. God exists in me. God exists in you. And because God exists in me, I'm able to recognize all of you, of which God exists in. That's how we want to look at everybody. Spirit is the medium through which I am. The energy, if we could really get that in the medium, the energy of God living within us all the time. We're not separate from it. We are part of the one mind. And recognize that we are surrounded by a universal mind. So The thoughts that we have during the day, beloveds, are part of a universal mind if we allow it to be that way. Like I said in the beginning, you can either have the loved ones or you can have the fear thoughts, which separate us from God. It's almost certain that between friends, there is at time a silent communication, a sort of unconscious mental conversation going on with everyone. We feel other people's energy when we're together, don't we? And sometimes we can pick up thoughts of what other people are thinking about. When this arises, this conscious intelligence, we tend to call it mental telepathy. People out there who are reading other people's thoughts or ideas of things that are going on. It's God. This communication with others is going on all the time. How can it not? If God is speaking through me and each and every one, and there's only the one mind, whether your conscious mind is aware of it or not. These impressions that are going on are more or less vague, and they not necessarily always come to the surface, but they are gradually building up, and forms of thought become more powerful in our mind. Just as radio messages are separate through a universal medium, so our thoughts are operative through a universal medium. So take that in. Your thoughts are part of a universal medium, God's thoughts operating through everybody in this planet. As we think about the medium of radio transmission in terms of the law, so we want to talk about mental laws now. We should think of the mental medium in terms of the law of the mental medium and the law of mental action, which is all the mind of God, or the Spirit of God. We cannot call the universal medium of law God any more than we could call electricity God. It's a part of it. It's oneness with it. But the universal medium mind is but one of the many attributes of the avenue through which God operates his law. So what that says is there's all these avenues and areas of the medium of God that God gets to express itself through each and every one of you, through the thoughts you have during the day, through your conversations with other people, through your relationships, for how your consciousness is and how you see. It's all God operating through its medium. All laws must be subjective. The soil knows how to take a seed and make a plant from it, but it does not know whether it's making a tomato or a potato. If this were not true of the laws of nature, we would not depend upon them. We should be confronted with illogical fancy. One of the most difficult problems to realize is that when we are dealing with the law of mind, we are dealing with an absolutely impersonal thing. It just knows how to create without knowing what it creates. Does that make sense? Your thoughts are thinking, and your thoughts are creating things without knowing what it's creating. Therefore, we must distinguish between the law of mind and the spirit which uses the law. The ancient teachers and the ancient people taught that there is an infinite, self-knowing spirit. One of the oldest sayings in the world is, spirit is the power that knows itself. So again, the power of God, who knew itself as it began to create everything in the universe out of itself. That's the beginning of life that we're a part of, which is really powerful to understand that we're a part of this belief that says it understood itself, and we can have the same thing. We can understand ourselves. The law is the karmic law of Buddha. It's the law that binds the ignorant together and frees the wise. It is the cause and effect of the West. There is a law in the universe which operates in a certain way according to the tendency that we have within our inner mind set in motion. We cannot destroy it, but we can direct its movement. We can't destroy our thoughts. We can't destroy our mind, but we can direct the movement of what we want to think about. Can we? We have the freedom to do that. Just as we plant seeds and later decide, oh, I wish something else was there, we go out and we dig up the first ones and we plant other ones in their way. Same thing with our thoughts. Let's get rid of the old thoughts and put new thoughts in. Let's practice that, opening up to God. We're not destroying the soil when we do that, but we're just using it in a different way. When we are talking with subjective, we're dealing with that which is subject to the conscious volition or the Spirit of God and the existence of one's will, the connection with our will. We have a will, free will that was given to us by God. We are able to think about what we want to think. We are able to create what we want to create. We are the creators. We get to look at the outcome of it and say, is this what I really want? Is this working within the medium of God and Spirit within me? Or is this working with intelligence? When this is realized, we shall no longer be superstitious about the use of the law, which sometimes people get in. I don't understand this law. It feels superstitious to me that I'm connected to one another. What does that really mean? It's been difficult to get away from it along because of theology. But once we get into a scientific approach to the subject, it helps us understand there is a law, many laws in this universe that work for our good. And maybe what we're discussing is a law of nature. It happens to be a mental force, an intelligent and creative one, like electricity. Electricity can do one of two things. It can either light our house, cook our food, or electrocute us if we use it incorrectly. Same thing with our thoughts. So we want to talk about the threefold nature of God. We find that as we study our own being as man, which we're talking about, we begin to deduce about the nature of God, or the universal being. There is no way that we can know God except by studying man. Why? Because God is there. And the more we understand each other, the more we understand God. And someone may be saying, God reveals himself. Yes, he reveals himself through us. And we only know what about God as we judge what God must be. All of us who have these judgmental ideas about God because that's what they're feeling about themselves. And then we put God in this category that says, oh, God is judgmental. God makes things wrong. God does this. God does that. All coming from our own beliefs. So it's time to change it. If we could study the true nature of man and see the difference between the positive thoughts and the negative thoughts, and look at the ones that have dwelled into real nature of God, then it springs forth within us. We have found that man is threefold in nature. What are they? Physical, mental, emotional. Right now, that's what man works with. But God is also threefold in his nature. What are they? No. First of all, God is spirit or self-knowingness. It knows itself, all of it. Secondly, God is law and action. Thirdly, God is the result or the body. So if we look at this, we see that God is spirit or self-knowingness, all of this here. Here's God, creator of all that is. As it comes down, it has to go through this section, which is law and action. It's making the law of who it is, and the action through our thoughts or however God wanted to create everything in its world. And then it goes into the body. So what God goes through with law comes down into our physical body. So as a result, part of that is true. We have a body that God lives in here. So this is the logo for Science of Mind. There's the threefold nature of God and the threefold nature of man. So we want to know that spirit is coming down through law. God has to have a law that says, I exist, I am, so are you. And then it comes down in the physical body and we get to experience it. God is law. No, God is the self-knowing spirit, means the divine being that we've always believed in. It's a divine being, it's universal. We've adored it since the beginning of time because we are part of it. God by law means the way in spirit works. The law has to work according to the way it was created. God is the law. And then God as the body means the manifestation. So God coming down in the physical form. The trinity of being appears to run through all nature and life. For instance, there is electricity. There's the way it works, and there's the outcome of it, the light or executive power or something that is created by the electricity. So it operates, this trinity that we have has been throughout the ages. People have maybe looked at it mistakenly, or like we said, for those of us that are Catholics, Father, Mother, and Holy Ghost, whatever that term meant. But to look and see that it is spirit, it is all-knowing. It comes down through the law of I am, and then it comes in the physical body, and then we live that law within us. So, every great religion and every great spiritual philosophy has taught this Trinity. It is, and these are talks that I've given you in the beginning of the year, because Science of Mind does this. It is the thing that it is the way it works, and it's what it does. And we get to understand that all the time. How does it work in us? what does it do, and how does it work through me? The thing is absolute intelligence. The way it works is absolute law, and what it does is the manifestation. Does that make sense? That's always happening with us, with all of our thoughts and the way we allow God to express through us. So the action of the thing itself is what the Bible calls the Word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Every word that we say is God speaking, because it's the absolutely knowingness coming through the law, and it is active intelligence, absolute intelligence. So, I hope that made some sense. I've given some idea of what man, the great discovery. Now what we have to do is go to Spirit next Sunday. Namaste.